This is an interesting point because potentially what was the start of the culture war, depending on who you asked, Gamergate, you're familiar?
Mm-hmm.
This was a lot of people who identified themselves as left libertarian on the political spectrum being angered that everything was becoming political because you had these quote unquote news organizations, video game news and video game companies increasingly putting very specific ideologies in their games, and people were upset with that.
Right.
So they would agree with you, like, why are we politicizing everything?
Please don't bring me into Gamergate, man. I mean, my life is hard enough.
I was playing Heroes of the Storm last night on Blizzard, and I was like, if I type F the CCP, am I going to get banned off of Blizzard? I didn't test it, but I was wondering.
Well, there are certain things that YouTube banned, but to the point about politicizing everything.
Yeah.
Video games used to have a lot of politics in them, but it was more of like background acceptable American views. When they started becoming very different, like at core like Marxist, having some kind of like Marxist tinge to a lot of them.
What do you mean by Marxist?
So like,
because I will say in America that word has a meaning that I don't understand.
In the true sense of Marxist ideology of oppressed versus oppressor.
Well,
so like,
okay, to me, Marxism is, there's lots of oppressed versus oppressor ideologies, but Marxism to me is strictly a class-based struggle. All other structures are invalidated.
No, but that was a key point. I mean, I think around Occupy Wall Street, we had the very much class-based narrative of the 1% versus
well, exactly.
the 99.
Occupy Wall Street to me that's a Marxist struggle.
But
video games almost can't be. I mean, he rejects any aesthetic category.
Well, so are you familiar with the origins of critical race theory?
Yeah, but that's not. I mean, to me, that's not Marxism. I mean, I think it has come to mean something in this country that I just don't recognize in my own readings of Marxism, in my own readings of. I've certainly to me that's an identity politics formulation, which is a completely separate thing.
Well, when it comes
Marxism.
to like Roblox, you want to talk about video games enslaving people in a class-based system.
Dude,
that's what it is.
Totally off subject.
Oh, okay.
So critical race theory, specifically, Kimberly Crenshaw wrote that Marx didn't understand American racial politics, and that the idea of oppressed versus oppressor can't just be class-based when race is inherently tied to class.
Right. Yeah, but I mean that's inherently a rejection of Marxism. Right, like I mean, right, like that, like Marxist, like in the Jewish question, he says, there are in effect no ethnicities. All there is class.
So I think
so. To me, this whole reading of Marxism,
it's a semantic issue, though, is what I would say.
I guess so, but like it does seem to me pretty important that because Marxism conjured so much evil in the world. Right, like because it conjured so many totalitarian regimes. Like to call something Marxist to me is like. I mean, that's kind of the ultimate insult because it was ultimately so evil, right? Yeah. And for like, that's not what applies to these other forms.
Let me bring you there. So I went down to Occupy Wall Street on like day 3, and
you were right. Yeah.
So I ended up streaming and stuff, but it started out with conservatives, libertarians, liberals, and leftists all in one place, saying we very much oppose the bailouts, the corruption in the system, the revolving door policies. In the first week, there was so much talk about these big banks got bailed out. The guy who works for the pharmaceutical companies gets a job with the FDA. The guy from the war machine, Halliburton, becomes the vice president. It's a revolving door.
Sure.
But within about 2 weeks, critical race theory took over. And all of a sudden, you couldn't speak at their assemblies if you were a white man. And if you wanted to speak, or I should say, you were at the bottom of the list on their progressive stack.
Right.
So it started out as essentially Marxist, the class-based oppression, quickly turned into a bunch of intersectionalists, critical race theorists coming in and saying, no, you guys don't understand. Race is actually the core component. And then all of a sudden the narrative there shifted, the libertarians and conservatives left. And that this was one of the starting points, at least in the culture war that I've experienced, where
this is when I'm talking about
took over.
When I'm talking about self-defeating left-wing politics, like this is what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Like what is required from the left now more than ever in a complete sense is solidarity, and it is completely incapable of providing that even on the most basic levels, right? And that's why, to me, like, because my book is about collapsing systems, right? And how systems collapse, and like what is causing the collapse of systems, and the left is actually too weak to cause the collapse of the system because it eats itself in 5 minutes. That's why Occupy Wall Street went nowhere.
But that's technically not true. Well, Occupy Wall Street resulted in a massive shift of wealth from for-profit to credit unions. And it resulted in, I think the Democratic Party pulled their money out of Bank of America and moved it to Amalgamated, which is a union-operated bank.
Oh, yeah?
So
how much was that?
The DNC's funds? I don't know. I can't remember. It was tens of millions, maybe.
Well, tens of millions. I mean, like,
we're
talking about the United States of America.
But it's a big, you plant the seed of a cultural shift, and that matters. So when I look at Occupy Wall Street and I see the rise of what was effectively a form of, I think it was overtly critical race theory, it then makes its way into something bigger, into media, it expands. That was the first experience I had with it. It was kind of a crazy experience to see how racist they were. I mean, overtly separating people into different racial categories to make them vote on policy was insane.
Do you think you would qualify as someone who was, like, the process of complementary radicalization would apply to you?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
100%.
That's interesting.
So however,
but how do you negotiate that? I'm curious. Because, the way that they think about it, the way that the experts that I talk to think about it is like an inverse pendulum. So like as a pendulum swings, it tends to the center. But in American politics, the energy sends it to more extreme forms. Right?
We're not seeing the same level of extremism on the right as we are on the left.
Oh, I disagree. I mean, I would have to disagree with you there. Like, I mean, you see, there's all kinds of right-wing extremism. I mean, there's and the other thing about extremism on the right is also way better armed.
Well, let's talk about some examples.
January 6th?
That's a big one for sure.
Well, there you go.
But what else?
The Oath Keepers list, 40,000 people. Well,
what did they do? What have they done?
Well, January 6th.
But look, January 6th, you had 800 people.
Well, I mean, certainly, like, they're
relatively disorganized.
Okay, well, the extreme right in the United States is, of course, really hard to figure out. The way I think of it is as a like a smorgasbord of ideologies. Some that are completely incompatible, and some that are. So there's.
It's true for the left too.
Oh, the left is totally chaotic.
Yeah, it's all
right. Like I mean, for my own sake, I think we can just dismiss the left as a force, right? Because in America, because it is so disorganized and it eats itself, right? So what you see on the right is like there are sovereign citizens, there are 3%ers, there are oath keepers, there are sagebrush rebels, there are Second Amendment absolutists, there are tax evasion people, there are tax avoidance people. So there's
what have they done?
Well, of the political murders of every year, which amount to like about 70 on average since 2015, I think the number. Don't quote me because it's in the book and I don't have it on my fingertips. But I think it's like 72% are far right, and like 7% are far left, and the middle is like various. So I would say, like, when I talk to the experts. The fear of political violence is much clearer from the right.
And that's why I said I feel like the far right is more sharp, right? When they do take action, it's extreme.
Well, we're also dealing, I think we should acknowledge this because we are all trying to stay human beings here, is that we're dealing with a lot of people who are on the line between mental illness and political affiliation. We're dealing with a lot of people who are criminal, who are just simply criminals and use politics as a cover for their violence. And like that has to be acknowledged too, right? And that this political radicalization gives them cover for mental illness and for their violence, right? Those things all like, also those numbers, like, to be clear, are not from the FBI. They're from journalist reporting organizations who are going through newspapers to figure out what are violent crimes.
And they're defining who's far right and who's far left.
Well, they're trying to pick up the pieces, but honestly, this work has not been done at a government level. It's been done at an academic level.
See,
it's
not
ideal.
I want to get back to that point because I don't think we got a chance to flesh it out.
Yeah.
So my point was that there's substantially more far left polarization and extremism compared to the right. And to make my point. Let me ask you a question. If you went to would you fear violence against you at a right-wing rally?
I've always gotten along really well with far right people. Like, I quite like them. Like, I
But just real quick for the sake of argument, you wouldn't really.
Oh, I definitely would.
Well,
when you go to a far right rally, there are many people walking around with large weapons.
I don't know what a far right rally is.
So just I've been on the ground for I went on the ground for maybe about 8 years of my career.
I look like this. I'm like a white dude from Alberta.
So you'd be more likely to get attacked by the far left.
Well, I've never felt threatened by the far left. Now, I'll
give you a specific example.
Let me give you an example. Like I attended the 2016 inauguration. I covered it for a Canadian magazine. What I fear genuinely is not really either side. It's when the two sides are together. That's what's scary.
Donald Trump's inauguration.
Yeah.
There were about 400 black-clad leftists smashing windows, starting fires, and attacking people in the streets.
Yeah, there were plenty of far-right groups there too.
But they weren't doing anything.
Well, they were sort of triumphantly there too. Well, there was some violence, but I would say that the atmosphere of menace. Like you're just asking me my feelings, right?
So it's just it's my personal experience, but there's also a really great example.
But you look like you look, Tim. I mean, like if you were a black woman and you were at a far right rally, I think that would be a completely different thing. And like that's one of the things that I've always found. Like far right people get along with me very well. Like I like talking to them. They're nice guys. Like honestly, like they're perfectly polite.
You want to know what I saw in Portland? I saw the far left screaming the N-word over and over again at right-wingers. I saw the Proud Boys with a bunch of different people of different races. And there was a black Proud Boy who was walking down the street, and Antifa was screaming incessantly the N-word at him. I've been on the ground at all these things. Daryl Davis.
We have very different experiences of these things.
For sure. Are you familiar with Daryl Davis?
No, I don't know who that is.
He's the black jazz musician who he decided, he thought to himself one day, how could someone hate me if they don't know me? So he started going to Klan meetings.
Yes, that guy. He's fantastic.
And we booked him to speak at an event called Ending Violence, Racism and Authoritarianism. He was our headline speaker to talk about de-radicalization. Antifa threatened to burn the theater down, so they canceled on us. The after show venue refused to back down, so Antifa came and protested. And he said, look, guys, don't worry, I'm going to go talk to him. And when he went out there, they started screaming at him, chanting at him, and wouldn't let him speak. He wrote a Facebook post which went viral where he said, I've never experienced anything like this. That I was able to go and talk to Klan members as a black man, but he couldn't even talk to these leftist activists outside without them screaming at him.
Well, look, all I can tell you is the experts I talk to, the people that study this stuff, are much more afraid of the right than the left. Now,
could it be that they are on the left?
Well, they're from foreign countries.
So the answer is yes, they are on the left.
I guess so. I mean,
if they're from Belgium, yes, they're on the left.
Well, they're from Norway.
I think. See, I'm going to go back to one thing you said. I think if you went to, I haven't been to a far right rally. I've been to Trump rallies. My experience has been that if you are a black woman, people will go so much further out of their way to be accommodating because they want to demonstrate that much more that they are not racist, because they have been pinned by the left as you are a Trump person, you must be a racist.
Can I just?
And I find that amazing that's what has to be done, but that is what happens.
Don't you think the time has come to stop asking yourselves who is more to blame, and start figuring out either how do we reconcile this or how do we come to some kind of conclusion that is not violent? I mean, you're talking about like. All of this stuff, like you're getting yourselves really angry about this stuff.
Oh God, no!
And I don't,
not in the slightest bit angry.
No. Look,
no. That's not fair. Just because it's a heated conversation, it's not angry.
Listen. I'm not blaming anyone. I'm just saying, like, the point of this book is really that the moment has come where you have to ask yourself, how do we get ourselves out of this cycle of those people are awful. Oh, where all people are, our people are awful. But that's in response. Like that's the crisis that is facing you is no longer one of who is right,
We agree.
but like how do you work out these structures into
You
a
don't.
way
Well, here's
that
the
is
sh-
civilized
well,
and
sorry.
that is civilized and is
You're killing me.
I know the answer. You got to give them something to live for, and you got to unify people. with an idea.
So
Civil war is the
heated by it.
worst thing that can happen.
Oh, for sure.
Civil
Death is
war-
the worst.
No, like
Destruction,
being
negative.
conquered by a foreign country is nothing compared to civil war.
It's the-
Yeah.
like
And-
it's the worst thing that can happen to a country. It's
And
a disaster.
China
Can
will
I-
come in if this escalates.
So
Well, you're going to need, like, in part of the book, I'm like imagining what it would be like to have a negotiated settlement with the United States, which would have to be internationally monitored.
and we love that in this country.
Yeah.
We
I mean,
love foreigners.
What
So-
would America love more than
so-
Chinese peacekeepers on the ground?
Again, I
in
have
the
my
States?
bias, and I'm very well aware that I have my bias. So no bones about it. But so go after me. But let me make my point.
Yeah.
So you said when you look at political assassinations or political murders, based on, you said those numbers were based on journalists who dig into.
Well,
and they look
assassination is
at-
a separate question.
Not assassination,
Political
murders,
violence.
political violence, and they were done based on journalists who dug into the story and read it. In 5 years from now, if a journalist reads an op-ed in the Las Vegas Post, which talked about the Black Lives Matter attempted murder in Louisville, they called him a right-wing Trump supporter, basically. They said that this is the cause of right-wing violence. And they said, although he is not, and if you read the op-ed, and I sent it to Lydia because I was so apoplectic
Yeah, I
at
saw
it,
that.
if you, as of now, he has not been identified to any right-wing groups, but this is Trump violence. This is
Even-
an editorial in the Las Vegas Sun after it came out that he was a Black Lives Matter activist. So you want to say to that editorial board, what are you doing? Right? Like, why are you writing a story saying this is a right-wing extremist who tried to kill a Jewish man running for mayor, when all of the evidence there says he is a left-wing radical?
But I'll answer that, and then I want to answer a point you made.
I don't want to hear your answer to my question, because like I think you're a very interesting case of somebody who has lived through complementary radicalization, and I would like to know how you see escaping from it.
There isn't an escape. But the to your point, it's a conflict.
Yeah.
They're going to say what they need to say to support their side by any means necessary. And so you actually have groups called like by any means necessary. The reason why there is no escape. So you asked me if I am, I forgot how to phrase it, but like if I am subject to complementary.
Well, I'm curious. Like I don't know if I don't know you, but I would like you seem to me like you would fit into that category that I've seen sociologists describe. I mean, maybe that's not fair, and if it's not, please tell me.
No, it is without a doubt. But I think the issue at hand is what's the best example to give? The truckers in Canada are a really great example. I supported Occupy Wall Street, their right to protest. I interviewed people on the ground. I defended Extinction Rebellion when they blocked the streets in D.C. and put up a boat and said, we demand to be heard. When Ron DeSantis was working in Florida on the anti-riot law, I said, It is wrong to make it a felony to block a road. Those who make peaceful revolution impossible make violent revolution inevitable.
See, I'm the opposite. I want them all banned. But
Well,
anyway.
but here's what happens. The same people that I met 10 years ago who defended the right to occupy streets are now opposed to it in Ottawa.
Well,
So-
Ottawa's a very different situation because it's been going on for 3 weeks. But,
And Occupy Wall Street went on for 2 months.
well, I was opposed to Occupy Wall Street.
And
too.
you also had the Chaz and the Chop. You also had Minneapolis. But it's not about your
Yes.
views. It's not about your views.
Right.
It's about the fact that
Yeah,
we
fair
have
enough.
we have in this country 2 parent factions. Within those parent factions, we describe them as left and right. It's fairly nebulous. You have several smaller groups. Many of them don't like each other. Antifa people don't like Democrats, but
No,
often
they
they're
hate them.
But their politics do align sometimes.
Well, barely.
But institutionally, right? So the Democrats support Black Lives Matter to try and earn votes, which then gives funding to, say, the federal government gave funding for COVID relief that the Illinois government then gave directly to Black Lives Matter. I believe it was $300,000. That would never happen with the Oath Keepers. That would never happen with the Proud Boys. In fact, the Proud Boys get called terrorists and evil and demonized. Thanks for checking out this segment from the Timcast IRL podcast. If you want to watch live, you can check out this channel Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. Now, don't forget to smash that like button, subscribe to this channel, and if you want more unfiltered and uncensored content with all of these guests, go to timcast.com and become a member. all of these guests you know and love in exclusive segments on our website where we are unrestricted in what we talk about. So you'll definitely not want to miss it. Thanks for hanging out. We'll see you all next time.